Hi everyone, welcome to this new video. Today I thought I would go back to all the games I've made during the past year just to have some kind of retrospective. So for each of the titles I've made, I'm going to talk a bit about them, why I made them, and the various challenges I had, and like that we're going to see how I progressed so far. And if you're thinking of making games, you can see like the progress. I'm also going to tie in this video with the content I've been making on YouTube. So it's been mostly a year since I've started making tutorials, game dev tutorials. So I mostly make project-based game tutorials. So we build full projects, and most of the games I've built this year were for tutorials that I would then release on my channel and show you how to make it. So let's go to my itch.io, which is the place where I mostly host my games. If you aren't following me yet on itch.io, by the way, you can follow people on itch.io. Feel free to do so. You will be notified more early or earlier when I release a new project. Okay, so the first game I made was Harvest Move. And initially, I created my channel just to promote it. But it didn't work that much anyway. So this is the game. It was made for a game jam. It was the Ludum Dare game jam. I don't remember the number, but I just remember the theme. The theme for that game jam was harvest. It was basically about making a game about harvest. You could be creative with how you would incorporate the theme. So I've built this game, but I did not finish it on time to submit it. I did submit it, but it wasn't the actual competition. So yeah, I still made the game to completion. So I suggest that we just start playing the game. I'll explain what the game is about, and then I'll talk about the various challenges, how I made it, etc. So Harvest Move was a game where you play on the grid. So let's jump right into it. One thing I messed up with this game was the sound design. The sounds are way too loud, so I'm just gonna remove them for now. I'm gonna also go into full screen just to show you how the game is played. So basically, it's a turn by when you move, the other NPC moves. So if I do this, everything moves, etc. The goal is to collect as many plants as possible without getting hit by the crows. So each plants are not equal in value. I need to be careful. And each crows move into a predefined pattern. So it's really a game about learning the patterns, and you enter in some of kind of flow state where you really get good. And you see here I just died. And when you die, you have a rank. So depending on the number of plants you've accumulated, you have a different tiers. This was a progression system I just implemented last minute because it did feel pointless, the game, without any progression. So yeah. The way I built this game was in JavaScript, and it was actually my first serious game in this language. So I've made games in JavaScript in the past, but there were nothing like things like Pong with more than one balls, etc. And here it was the first time I made my own art for this game, and I think it turned out pretty well. I think there's a kind of strong visual identity to this art style I've came up with, and I just came up with it randomly. I was like exploring with colors and trying to make do with the limitations I had. I needed to make this game quick, so that means the art I was going to make for it was pixel art. And I also, for some reason, I initially the game was blue, so I used a bluish color palette. Everything was blue, but it didn't fit really with the theme. So I started going to the darker route and with crows, but the crows weren't really visible, so I needed some kind of outline. And this is where I had the idea of using very strong colors like red, yellow, blue for outlines and for the plants, so they really pop out. So really, I would like to revisit this game, add some lore maybe, and just change the instead of having it being a scoring system, it's just about maybe having boss battles or really I like the idea of patterns here. The fact that the crows always move in the same pattern so you can learn them. And I think you could add bosses where they have also their own patterns, and it can be really satisfying. Initially, when I developed this game, it was using random patterns. This is where I realized that in game dev, you need to be really careful with randomness. sometimes it can just be like a lazy cop out where you don't want to think too much about something, but it actually makes your game less fun, even though there's more variety. So it's not, for example, when I had the crows move in random directions, every run was different, but it wasn't that fun. It didn't feel like a game of skill. By the way, if you want to play this game, tell me your score. I think my best was maybe B rank, etc. So yeah, I've built this game with the Kaboom.js library. So instead of using like the Canvas API, there is this nice library called Kaboom.js, and it's so nice, in fact, that I've dedicated the last year in making tutorials for it because it wasn't that popular. It's getting popular now. So a couple of one relatively popular game dev YouTuber used it for one video. He's called Goodgis. If you're if you're aware of the game dev scene, YouTube game dev scene, you can see that you probably know who I'm talking about. So at this point, Kaboom was in its version 2000. So this might sound strange if you're not familiar with Kaboom.js. So the way Kaboom.js versioning works is that it hops in thousands. So Kaboom 1000, Kaboom 2000, Kaboom 3000. So basically, Kaboom 3 would be 3000. So this was in the 2000 version. And at this point, there were a lot of limitations and a lot of features weren't there. So now it's been much like I had to make my game with those limitations in mind. And I think that's great because limitations or constraints really breeds creativity, because sometimes you cannot do what you wanted to do, but you'll discover something that actually might end up being better than what you had in mind. And the reason you discovered that thing was because of the limitations. So yeah. And after having made this game, it's when I came across this YouTuber called Chris Courses, who made really popular JavaScript game tutorials. Uh, at this point, I didn't think that JavaScript was really a programming language that people were interested in making games with. Maybe hobbyist. I am a hobbyist, and I was coming from normal software development. So yeah, maybe I should have prefaced this video with my background so you can know like what is achievable. I have a computer science degree. I've worked as a software developer, so mostly in the web space, so web applications. So this is my background. I so that's why I started making games in JavaScript, is because at the time I was using TypeScript, etc. And I just didn't want to learn Unity or Godot or any of those engines. I didn't feel like it was a productive use of my time, because at this point, I still don't want to work for a game company. Like I just want to make my own games. And one thing I really like also about making games in JavaScript is the fact that it is so straightforward to have it playable for others. It's straightforward to make the game, more straightforward and more easy, especially with the Kaboom.js library than using Godot, Unity, etc. However, the drawback is you're more limited in what you can do. But for pixel art games, it's perfect. For prototyping, it's perfect. You cannot really make 3D things, so but I actually don't have any interest in making 3D games for now. So Kaboom.js really came at a time where it was really the perfect fit. It wasn't too hard to learn, and it was using a programming language I already knew, so I just dived into it. So initially, I did not plan to make the game, to make games. In fact, I was just doing normal software development. So when I discovered this, I gave it a shot and I really liked it. Now here I see a comment like, that's the scariest game I've ever played. That's because of the sound design. When you play, by the way, just a warning, when you play the game, lower the volume. I messed up this. I put sounds that are too loud. So when you die, you have a crashing sound, but you won't hear it here because I've removed it. I muted the tab. Okay, so that was the first game. Now, like I said, I discovered this guy who made a JavaScript game tutorial, and I thought that I would do the same thing but using Kaboom.js. And the first tutorial I ever made was the JavaScript fighting game tutorial. If I look at this game, it's this. So if I click here, all right, you can see the game. And this was my first time I've built a fighting game. So it's a two-player game where you can hit enemies, and I haven't there's not much to say about this game except that I learned a lot. I learned how to make bars that gradually decreases smoothly using a tween. I wouldn't say this is my best project, but it's really it's really a tutorial game. I would say. I wanted to just prove the point that using Kaboom.js, you could make the same game that Chris Courses did in 3 and almost 4 hours, but in less in 1 hour. So that was the point of that video. Now, once I made this, I started gaining traction, a bit of traction, and I thought I would make a Pokemon like a JavaScript game tutorial. And this is what I did. And now here again, I was still in the mindset of making a tutorial. So those games, they are limited there. It isn't something you could reasonably sell, but I think it does a good job to implement certain systems. Actually, the system, the Pokemon battle system is really, it's just tackle, It's not fancy. I would like to revisit this someday and make an actual battle system, but I'm really proud of the tweenings, the gradual movement of the health bar, etc., and how the Pokemons fall off when they die, and how I was able to maintain state after battle. So here I'm just gonna click, and you can see the sprites disappearing. And then if I move up, let me defeat all of them. And yeah, this is when I realized that, Kaboom.js is especially really productive. It is really fast to make games, so much so that I didn't want to switch to anything else. But like I said, there are still some limitations in terms of the map, how uh, how big you can make before things start to lag. Here is the debug mode. And now I have discovered ways to optimize it, and I was using some things wrong. I'm gonna go over this later on. So at this point, I did feel a bit frustrated by the fact that to draw maps in Kaboom.js, you had to use arrays of strings. This is good if you want to make a roguelike and place your tiles, but it was really tedious to draw the layout as characters in a string. So I was starting to get a bit frustrated with this, but I still kept making games for a while. And later on, I'm going to explain how I discovered a way to just use an external editor, something called Tiled, to draw my maps and then import that into my game. So at this point, I did a few others. I don't think it's important to go over them. Let's look at them. The vertical platformer, again, it was a video that Chris Courses did here, and I wanted to just prove the same point. In 41 minutes, I built mostly the same thing. Now, this was just for someone searching those games to see that, hey, there is this Kaboom.js library that's worth looking into. That was the strategy in mind when I thought about it. But I think I want to put your attention to the platformer game tutorial. I think this was the most you can see here there is a bug in this game. Things are shaking a bit. This is something with Kaboom.js you need to be very careful. It's due to the fact that I don't remember the issue exactly, but it happens when you zoom in the camera on small things. The physics system kind of freaks out a bit and it shows you the trembling. So yeah, you either scale these sprites up, or you actually it's the contrary. You shouldn't. I don't remember actually what the issue was, but I think right now it doesn't occur anymore. So let's go back to the next project, which is the project I'm the most proud of for now. So this project was the first time to incorporate a lot of sounds. Okay, it's too loud. So here was the first time I made a longer game. where you could really have a lot of features. You had AI, enemy AIs that move back and forth. You could pass through platforms and pass down. You had a more varied level layout. And all of these things, I was able to make a game that was pretty nice to play. And it's my most popular tutorial game for now, except the Pokemon one. I probably did not collect the correct amount of of uh, of stars of coins. So the way the game works was that you collect a certain amount of coins, and then once you have the 17 coin, you pass to the next level. All right, so that was it. But you could see that here the performance isn't that great. I mean, it's okay. You could have 30 FPS. And the way I've built the level layout and was all in arrays of strings. And this is where it got really frustrating. I thought to myself that, hey, if I cannot make maps in a more efficient way, I might as well just not use Kaboom. Because this was really something very frustrating for me. So if I go back here, I made, yeah, so the next game I made was actually, it's not here. It's the Zelda Like. This one. Uh, yeah, so this one was published as a single video afterward, after a while, but it was actually released in multiple parts. I just unlisted the other parts and just combined them into one single video. But this is where I discovered that you could use tiled to draw maps instead of using arrays of strings. And here, if I'm just go to the link in the description, so this is not on itch.io. This is where you have better performance, but sometimes it still lags. You can see that I don't think I'm at, when you activate the debug mode, it's normal to lose frames, but it's mostly 30. And that's the reason for this was I created a game object. So in Kaboom.js, there's this concept of game object, and everything is a game object. But for maps, it's better not to create game objects for every tile. You should use the draw on the draw methods to just draw the tiles and not have them as game objects. However, you can keep the boundaries as game objects so you can have like collisions. So this was the first game where I really enjoyed doing this new way of making maps, and that's what led me to stick with Kaboom. For I don't have a sword, so I need to go back. Yeah, so that was the Zelda Like tutorial. And now the next project after that was remaking the fighting game I've made, but in TypeScript using everything I've learned. So this was my first TypeScript game dev tutorial. I wanted to test if there was some interests for TypeScript game development. That's why I made it. And I realized that mostly people they mostly prefer JavaScript, and it's fine. You know, I made another one that I'm really proud of, and maybe in the future they're gonna get popular. But yeah, I think I might stick with JavaScript because the only reason I used TypeScript was I wanted to test it out. I wanted to. I already used TypeScript like in normal software development, but I wanted to see like if it made programming the games much more easy, maintainable, etc. And it did in certain aspects. So yeah. Now, after having done this, I wanted to explore other things because I didn't want to be tied to a single library. Even though Kaboom.js is very great, I just want to expand my horizons. So this is where I made a strange decision to make a game using P5.js. Now, P5.js is a graphic or creative coding library. It has nothing except rendering for making games. And this took me a long time to make. I'm really proud of the tutorial here, and I think that this tutorial will probably outlast in terms of relevancy all of my other tutorials because the concepts I've explored in how to make this Pokemon game is applicable to other graphics library, things like Raylib, because they all work mostly the same way. So let's jump right into the game and Okay, why it's not working? Okay. So here I had to implement everything, camera system, etc. So here if I click on shift, you also have the boundaries, the collisions, etc. Dialogue system. It was a lot of work. So much so that I I almost got burnt out after doing it. But that's why I came back to Kaboom.js for the next tutorial because it was too much work. But I'm really glad I did it because I've learned a lot. And now if I want to make another game with P5.js, I have a bunch of code that can reused in future projects. So it should, in theory, make my game dev um, faster. So that's the advantage. Now there wasn't any sounds for this game because it took so much time just to make this system, and it ends like this because it just took too much time. So if I were to make a professional game, like something I would like to sell on Steam, I would not use P5.js unless you have already made other projects with it. So here, even with this project done, like I implemented the camera, scene system, basic battle system, animation player system, player controller, collision detection, etc. But it was a learning experience, I would say. And the reason I did this in P5.js, as I said, I wanted to expand my horizon, but I wanted to see like what I was missing out on the full, more control way of doing game dev, having more control. And while yes, you have more control, and if you want to implement features, just you and the time to do it, I think it just takes a lot of time, a lot of time. All right, so now this brings us to the last project I made on YouTube, and then I'll go over the a few others that I haven't, two actually that I haven't made videos out of. So here, the Kirby Platformer. So this was the first time I tried on channel to just make my own game assets. I wanted to make a Kirby-like platformer, and I drew from scratch the assets for it. Those assets you can see here. So here, I'm really proud of the final game. Again, it might have been a mistake for making the tutorial about it in TypeScript because it seems that there's less interest for TypeScript. I might make it in JavaScript sometimes in the future, remake it, but not immediately. I think that would be a bit too much reuse content, I guess. But yeah, this was really an excuse to make a game out of assets I've made on my own. I think I have a good eye for design. Prior to making game dev and prior to studying computer science, I was heavily into drawing. That's why I was able to leverage my knowledge or my skill I already had built up to make sprites. And for me, pixel art is relatively easy. Yes, you have to think in limitations, but it's like a game. It's like a puzzle game where you have to negotiate with every pixel to draw the things you want instead of just drawing it how you would like it in traditional means with just pen and paper. But yeah, so the advantage for that is that you get some nice. It's easier to make pixel art look nice, professional than traditional art. That's something I've realized is you could make a game that is relatively well drawn, but you can really easily fall into looking like a Flash game. And if you want to sell this on Steam, it might not work. But then again, I have never published a game on Steam. I don't have plans to publish a game on Steam right now. But anyway, if you wanted to use JavaScript to publish a game on Steam, it's possible. You just wrap it under a technology like Electron or NWJS as a desktop app, so you can bring your web game into a desktop app and you just sell it on Steam. It has been done by multiple other people, and yeah, so I think the game Crosscode does this. I also Vampire Survivor did this. Now it has been re-implemented, but the game got popular while it was made in JavaScript using the phaser library though. So yep. So now what's next for the channel and my projects? Oh, before doing that, let's actually look at the other projects, the two other ones. Infinite Wordcraft. This was the most recent thing. I built it really fast in P5.js. This game is mostly like a website, so P5 was actually a good fit. So if you've heard of the game Infinite Craft, it got really popular quickly. I don't think maybe the hype has died down a bit now, But the principle was that you can craft anything by combining elements. So here, wind and earth gives me, is it going to work? Dust. And the goal of this project was to prove that I could make the same thing without using AI. So the original game is using the Olama 2 model and is using basically AI to generate the results of the combinations. The way I figured out to do basically the same thing is to use two APIs. One is a dictionary definition, because sometimes you get words that are really fancy and I don't know them, but and sometimes even there's no definitions for them. But also I realized that there was an API where it gives you words similar a to words you provide it with. So if you provide one word, earth, it's going to give you words similar to that. If you provide earth with dust, it's going to provide words that are similar to, mostly similar to both. I don't know how they do the calculations, but it is said that it is used for auto completions, etc. So here I was able to make it the same game without spending any amount of money on servers or anything. Everything is client side. I just called the APIs from the client, so from the itch.io page, and that was the game. Now I think the game has died down, the hype for the Infinite. Let me look at the analytics for this. Yeah, so when Infinite Craft, the game Infinite Craft was extremely viral and popular, I got natural traffic coming to my itch.io page, but then it died down very quickly because, you know, it's not an actual game, it's just a playground, and at some point you just get bored. So, yeah, I could expand on this, make gamify it more, but I thought I would not spend more time because initially, I thought maybe it was just a challenge for myself. I thought, hey, I could do it. Maybe it would serve as a future game dev tutorial, and that's that. All right, so what's next for the channel? So my the next thing I want to do is to make a portfolio project, a portfolio as a game. So let me just open VS Code. Okay, so this is what I've got right now. npm run dev. I might as well just show you the progress I made. And then the address, open that up. So this is the game I'm currently building for the next tutorial. So as you just noticed, you can use your mouse and click. So it is intended to work on mobile. And when you collide with something, a text box appears, but this text box is not rendered within the canvas element. It's actually a div, not a div. Yes, it's a div so it's rendered within HTML and CSS, and then you can close it. So I think this is the first time anyone has shown or made a tutorial how to integrate this with Kaboom.js, how to make uh, both, how to have the canvas and then use the text box. And the reason I did this, if I go to the mobile view, very important. Let's say we go to the iPhone S2. You can see that it's responsive. Let me just remove this. And then you have your text box that is responsive. Now the text should be a bit smaller because it obstructs everything. But you can see the reason I'm using HTML for the UI is so I want things to be responsive. And the reason I want things to be responsive and for the gameplay to be this is because I want to make a portfolio website where it's a top-down 2D game. So for example, you talk to an NPC, it will tell, hey, this is JS Legends dev portfolio, and yep, so feel free to look around, and there will be some other NPC who will say, hey, I knew JS Legend Dev, he did this project, and he has this amount of skill. Or it could be totally different, where you just visit a place, let's say a room. Let's say it's my room, and then as you move close to certain objects, you see my computer. Okay, this is where I made my computer. Here's my diploma and stuff like that. So that would be a portfolio project. This was what was voted in the most. So by the way, if you go to the community tab, yeah, my computer is in French. So yeah, this is supposed to be like in English, community tab or just community. And then here I made a poll. So Which would you prefer I do next? Build a dev portfolio as a top-down 2D game, or a JavaScript desktop RPG game tutorial with Electron JS and Kaboom JS? Now, this was the most voted one when I started working on it, but it seems that it has equalized for now. But I'm not gonna go back to this. I'm just gonna finish this and then we'll see next. So, yeah, feel free to visit this. By the way, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're new and to activate the bell. I think this is how you find those posts when you get notified of them. Otherwise, you don't. All right, so yeah, I'm hoping also to maybe this year or future to also introduce devlogs that aren't like games that aren't for tutorials, like actual real games that I want to either sell. So that would mostly come in the form of devlogs. I'm I'm gonna see if I'm gonna actually do a devlog or not. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope this retrospective was useful to you. Maybe you want to see how realistic or what others can achieve and maybe compare to yourself. I mean, don't compare yourself, like everybody has different skill sets at the beginning. You need to put in the work, etc. I mean, maybe you can learn a thing or two from me, not not be depressed that you cannot build as many games or feel superior that yeah you only did this. Anyway, so thanks for watching and see you hopefully in the next tutorial or video or any other video I decide to make. Thanks for watching. Bye.